All right, we're back with another Christian movie discussion. Today we're talking about Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, created in 1956, and going to be pinning that film up against Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings. Which one do I think is better? Which one does things really well, or do they both do things really well and things that maybe don't work as much? And which of these films are going to stand the test of time? So we're going to talk about it. Let's get right into it. In Cecil B. DeMille's version of the Ten Commandments, you essentially get this rendition that just is a biopic on the life of Moses, from the start of his life to the end of his life and all the events that take place. And it is not an easy feat to watch this film. It clocks in at about 3 hours and 39 minutes, and it also has a prologue and an intermission, and even Cecil himself comes out on stage to essentially explain the purpose of the film and kind of tell you what you're in for. So for me, I had to split the film up into two different sittings, but overall, I don't think that was a downfall or a downside of this film. In this film, Charlton Heston plays Moses himself, and he's kind of like this larger-than-life alpha male, perfect character that can do no wrong. He's literally so tall, chiseled to the bone. He's tan, he's handsome, he's great looking, and essentially he's like Superman in this film. I mean, there's literally a scene where I had to pause it. I was like, oh my gosh, he looks like Superman. It's the scene where he's discovering who his real mother in the story, and just essentially the way that they had him even dressed just with a cape and just standing tall. He just literally looks like Superman and can't do any harm, and he's essentially he realizes he's this alien in his own realm, which is the kingdom of Egypt, and he's realizing that he's a Hebrew slave, or was born a Hebrew slave. And it's kind of like all these like parallels that I never picked up kind of on the Exodus story, but the way that Cecil tells it and the character that he writes is this more of a chiseled, just perfect version of Moses. I think that's the first contrast I could probably harp on whenever compared to Exodus, Gods and Kings. Ridley Scott's version, Moses is nuanced. Moses is broken. Moses is confused a lot of times. Moses is barely a believer until he gets up to Mount Sinai. And it's clear that, Ridley Scott wanted to communicate a lot of just the brokenness that men carry. And so that's a lot different from Cecil's character, who is more so this like perfect deliverer of Egypt, when Moses from Exodus, Gods and Kings is this more like broken man version that God chooses to use and raise up, rather than just a perfect man in general. Even in the 1956 The Ten Commandments, you have Moses kill a man, but the viewer feels as if it's justified because that man was about to essentially slay his friend Joshua. Hopping back over to the Ten Commandments, it feels timeless in the sense that that this movie was made in a granular scale, and that it was an achievement for filmmaking at the time, that they're using thousands of extras and these grand sets that all come to tell this huge story. Although it's epic and although it's grand, the film does drag, and you get that feeling a lot throughout the runtime. Honestly, the Cecil B. DeMille version could have 40 minutes cut out of it and still have a great story to be told. That's kind of a similarity with both of these films that I have, that I can kind of get in later on the Exodus, Gods and Kings. But essentially, still, the Ten Commandments is an enjoyable film that you could watch on a lazy Sunday. There's still a story to be told here, and a masterpiece, in terms of what it achieved at the time and the story that it put out into the world forever, and the telling of the Exodus, one of the earliest forms of cinematic telling of the Exodus story. And it gets a lot right. They use God's word as the source of a lot of the film, and I think it's going to stand the test of time in that sense, even though I'm like, for a modern viewer, it's way too long. You're not going to have the average moviegoer go and see this film. And in fact, whenever I was talking about this film to family members, even my parents, they had so much nostalgia wrapped around the discussion of the 1956 Ten Commandments because they'd seen it so many times on TV. It was always playing on TV, and there were commercial breaks, and you never actually saw the full thing because it's playing, and with the commercials, it might take 6-7 hours to get through the whole story. So you just drop in and watch bits and pieces. But it is cool now. They have it completely restored in 4K. I don't know who did the restoration, but I mean, it was spectacular being able to see the film in 4K. The color's vibrant, the color's beautiful. It plays like a play. It plays like this grand experience, and it's still worth watching. And so even though there's time that could be cut out, the entire thing, it all contributes to it being so big and this story of scale. So if I'm to compare that to Exodus, Gods, and Kings, there's a few things that they have in common. One is that both of these films are so epic. They have these incredible visuals. In 1956, obviously some of the visuals, they look really old and stuff, but at the same time, you can tell what they were communicating, and you can only imagine what the audience was feeling whenever things like the burning bush happened and the splitting of the Red Sea happened. Ridley Scott's version communicates a lot of the same feelings of awe and wonder, feelings of, oh my gosh, this is epic. This is so crazy that this is happening. But at the same time, it looks real. The visuals are stunning. And Ridley conveys a lot of beautiful wides to set the exposition and to show the exodus of 600,000 Hebrews and to show how big the waves are with the Red Sea. And basically, there's just so many technical advancements, obviously, that came around by 2014 where he was able to tell this story and make you feel like, oh my gosh, this is real. If that happened, that's what it would look like. Some other things that Ridley does super well is the plagues scene, I feel like is communicated. It is like nearing the climax of the film, and it really introduces so much tension when the plagues come in. Because, man, you see the wasps, you see the sores on people, and it's kind of like, it's disgusting to watch a little. And then ultimately, the most heart-wrenching plague to watch is definitely in Ridley Scott's version. It's the shadow of death overcoming all of the houses of Egypt, and the way that is visually communicated through lighting and through the use of candles and different lights going out and different things like that. I thought it was stunning, and I thought it was gut-wrenching to watch Ramses hold his child. And if you're a parent, like, some of that imagery sticks with you. And so I just thought Ridley Scott got this one just really right. I feel like he did the plagues in a way where they have high entertainment value. And this is cinema, and this is filmmaking. And so that's the point, right, is to entertain. It is to excite you, and I think that's what's happening here. And Scott's version, unfortunately, also has pacing issues, the same problem that I have with Cecil B. DeMille's version. Can somebody make a version of the story that does not have pacing issues? Basically, you get this epic battle scene in the start of the film, and the exposition is really exciting too, as they introduce Moses and Ramses II, and kind of all of the cast that are going to be involved in the story. And then once Moses essentially, comes to find out he's Hebrew and then is exiled, the film is dragging throughout this section, all the way up until, I think Moses comes back and the plagues start to happen, is when the film starts to pick back up again. And then it unfortunately has pacing issues again. I feel like Scott doesn't land the plane well after the third act. Maybe it's the epilogue you want to call it, but after the Hebrews have been delivered and the Red Sea has been split and the Exodus has happened, that is most definitely the most exciting climax of the film. And it could have just ended right after that. And it could have just ended them on their way to the promised land. You don't have to show the golden calf or whatever, and it could have just concluded at that story. But we get this kind of slow 20 minutes in the back of the film where Ridley like taps at and unpacks and hints at a little bit of things that are going on as if you're supposed to know because the Bible is an old and relevant book, but we don't really get to live in that. And to his credit, I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that there is a 4-hour cut of this film, or close to 4-hour cut, that Ridley Scott wanted to do and wanted to make. But because of, Hollywood politics, because of getting films done on time and on budget, that was not going to be a thing. But he wanted to do a 3+ hour, almost 4-hour version of this film, and that I would honestly love to see. I would love to see if the pacing issues, balance themselves out, and if they have better payoffs with his version of that film. If we're going to get into the acting of Exodus, Gods and Kings, I think there's the obvious elephant in the room that these are white guys playing Egyptians, and a lot of people I've read on Letterboxd and online, a lot of people have qualms with that. I don't have as much of a problem with that. I'm like, if the actor's amazing and you can kind of make him feel like an Egyptian, then entertain me and let me have it. And Christian Bale, I think, delivers a nuanced human Moses. I don't think that Charlton Heston plays, he's not supposed to play that type of role. He was supposed to play the Superman type of Moses, and he does that perfectly. But I think I prefer Christian Bale's Moses, which is a nuanced, very human, very broken type of man who has anger and impatience and confusion and just deals with the problems that humans deal with. Another thing that Ridley does is he personifies God as a little boy, and a little boy that's kind of angry and ornery and impatient and kind of rude. And this shows this is like the flaws of Hollywood making these films. I'm okay with Hollywood making biblical interpretations and giving their spin on it and changing elements of the story. He definitely does that here for the sake of what? For the sake of making a good movie, for the sake of entertainment value, and that's okay with me. But I know that a lot of people are going to have problems with God being interpreted as this little angry boy here. It just doesn't hint at the gracious and loving nature that God brings, at the holy nature that God brings. There's no like sense of holiness about this boy. When Moses is talking with God, he's not talking. It doesn't feel like he's talking to a holy God. It feels like he's talking to an angry little boy, because he is. So that's like just essentially Ridley's story that he's chosen to write here, and take it for what it is, whatever. I don't really care. I'm like, sure, like, because you have creative freedom, go and do that. But I'm like, that people are definitely not going to like that, not going to resonate with that as much. Ultimately, if I'm like going to pick to watch one or the other film, I think I'm going with Exodus, Gods and Kings. I think I have to recommend that because the stunnings are visual, the entertainment value is actually really high. There's sweet action scenes on the front end of the film, and the Red Sea, parting of the Red Sea scene is just stunning, and just some of the visuals are just sweet. So, and I love Christian Bale as Moses. Thought it worked. It's not perfect, definitely not a perfect film. Lots of flaws. He changed lots of the Bible to make his version fit, and that's, say what you want to say about that. But yeah, I think that's the one I'm like just going to recommend, especially just because the other one is such an undertaking. Cecil B. DeMille's, I think, is a film that everyone should see in their life once, but it's like a play. It's really long. Beautiful masterpiece of filmmaking for the time, but at the same time, we're going for entertainment value here. So Exodus, Gods and Kings, I feel like, is a film that is not perfect, far from it. As far as the Ten Commandments go, I think it's fantastic. I think it drags for me knowing that, there's like love triangle in there that essentially doesn't play into the bigger picture of the story of Moses, but it still helps add to the emotional pull of what's happening into the story, and the relational tension that Moses had to go through whenever he was being exiled, whenever he was coming back and returning to family, and then he was choosing, to follow God rather than to follow the dictator. And so it just adds value there, and so I'm not going to harp on it too much. The Ten Commandments, excellent, granular masterpiece of a film, and it gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. Exodus, Gods and Kings, definitely flawed, way shorter runtime, higher entertainment value, and so I'm going to give that a 3 out of 5 stars. That's kind of my conclusion on the Ten Commandments versus Exodus, Gods and Kings. I know that was a mouthful. I can't believe that you're still watching the video. If you are, but I will be releasing more videos, so stick around, click the like button, do all the YouTube things, and hopefully see you soon.